Thank you, Scott. And thank you all for coming. I didn't expect such a big crowd for a Saturday morning on the last day of the National Conference. So I truly appreciate you taking the time out of your morning and getting up to hear us speak. The great part about today's presentation is I get to go over some of the programming and the layering system, and then this afternoon we'll actually go over the actual teaching progressions for each lift that we talk about this morning. So I hope you can bear with us because this is more programming. This afternoon will be the practical hands-on demonstrations where we'll teach you and go over the specific teaching techniques that we use for these exercises. I truly want to thank the NSCA for giving me this opportunity, and in particular, Scott Caulfield and Virginia Meyer for always taking great care of myself and my family. I don't get to stand up here and present without the help of many people. I've really blessed to be on this platform, but I've had a tremendous staff for close to 30 years of great assistants, great interns, great volunteer help that have helped shape everything that we'll talk about today. But most importantly, I'm extremely fortunate because I've been blessed for 30 years to coach some of the greatest athletes in the world. I've coached 10-year-olds to all pros. I've learned a tremendous amount. Don't ever think that where you are is not important, because sometimes you'll realize some of the most important places you are places you never thought you'd find. And for me, one of those places was serving a year in the private sector, coaching 10, 11, and 12-year-olds. I learned more about coaching in that 1 year than I did in my other 29 years of coaching. So wherever you are, take the opportunity to feel blessed that you get the opportunity to work with young athletes and are able to coach and learn from them as much as they're ever going to learn from you. 3 points today before we get started that I want you to think about. First, you got to know me. This is our way. I don't expect to dictate it to be your way. This is one guy's, one program's thought process on teaching a movement that is highly, highly valuable and very, very common in most strength and conditioning programs that you see today. The problem that I've seen is the atrocious technique that we accept. And I've accepted it in the past, and I've seen it continually go on today through social media. Chasing a number is not benefiting the athlete. Technical proficiency is benefiting the athlete. So I want you to think about that as we go through. But the 3 big points that I want you to think about when you're thinking about your environment, your coaching style, and the athletes you have is 1, what I call simplicity cues. 2, layering. Certain exercises you can layer by building upon different exercises to get to the end goal. And then 3, formatting that procedures through a study, diagnosed, programming, design model. So those are the big 3 as we get going that I'd like you to think about. And remember, I observe the right to be wrong. My history in Olympic lifting is this: 0. The backstory of all this comes because I'm not an Olympic weightlifting coach. I'm a strength coach who teaches athletes that aren't going to be weightlifters. And sometimes when you try to teach a non-weightlifter how to lift a weight as an exercise of the power clean, they're not going to understand the technical jargon that somebody who lifts for a living is. Because you got to remember, the lifter, the Olympic weightlifter, or the power lifter walks in the weight room, that's their sport. Most of us coach athletes that they don't even want to be in the weight room. And they're more worried about their sport skills than they are the skills that we're trying to teach. It's our job to educate them on how this process can enhance their skills through transfer. And a power reverse curl, jumping jack clean with 350 pounds has no chance to transfer to athleticism. It looks good on your board, but it's not helping the athlete, and you're probably leading them down the road to future injury. All right, big green, right? First, who's your clientele? I base it into 3 different ones: fitness enthusiast, Olympic weightlifter, high school, college, or professional athlete. I would teach this progression to the fitness enthusiast just the same as I would a high school, college, or professional athlete. If a guy walks in or a woman walks in and asks me to coach them in Olympic weightlifting, I'm going to send them to another coach that is more proficient in Olympic weightlifting than I am. The number one thing we have to do before we even get to the point of using external loading is, can your athletes maintain proper position with just their body weight, or what I call internal load? If they cannot get into a proper athletic position stance with no load, do you really expect them to be able to do it with load? So we have a whole preparation through our Block Zero process that we teach the athletic position. It's critical that you understand everything starts from point 0 and continues to elevate as training age improves. But I put this up on purpose to know that everything starts with internal loading. We have done a poor job when I first started in this profession of just meeting an athlete and putting a barbell in their hands and not even understanding what level of training they've had. So here we are, these strength and conditioning coaches, talking about how we're going to prevent injury and reduce injury, and we don't even know our athletes' names, and the first thing we do with them in a weight room is ask them how much do they lift. These are things to ponder as we go on in learning about teaching progressions. So the first thing I would talk to you about is body weight movements, gymnastics movements, and teaching the athletic position. If we got everybody up right now and tried to get into an athletic position, some of y'all, again, based off my teaching, and I'm at fault too, some of us, if we continue to do 10 reps, all 10 reps wouldn't look the same, and we're the ones coaching our athletes. You have to be able to understand that. We are the ultimate reflections of our program. Simplicity cues. When I'm talking to our athletes about an Olympic movement, and we are primarily a power clean team, I do not snatch and I do not jerk my athletes. I'm trying to look for technical proficiency and mastery in certain very few big structural lifts and go from there. So we're going to put all our banging bucks for this into the power clean. And the great thing about teaching the power clean, on its way to success, we're going to have numerous exercises that help build your exercise pool to build a protective and productive athlete. So we started off with attack. You have to attack in the weight room. Any exercise, you have to attack. You cannot be unaggressive even with your first preparation set, because numerous athletes and kids get hurt not on the big weights, but it's on their prep sets because, oh, this is just 135, clean 300, so they don't prepare themselves right, and they injure themselves because their technical proficiency is poor. So every time an athlete approaches a bar in your weight room, you have to have them understand their mindset is, regardless of the weight, everything must mimic every rep you attempt to do to the closest perfection as possible. You're chasing a thing that never can happen, the perfect technique. There's about 300 people in here. We're going to have 300 different technical aspects of what a power clean looks like. But at the end of the day, if you do your job and have the specific cues and the teaching progressions, your team will look fundamentally sound, and a coach who is visiting would know that hey, these guys are on point, that they have been coached fundamentally sound, and there's a plan and a protocol to approach each specific lift, this group looks very, very, very productive. So for us, I asked myself, what can my athletes understand very, very quickly? Because we coach, if you're in there with a full team of football players, depending on the level, you could have 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, up to 100 plus. And even if you're in there with women's basketball, you're going to have 15 athletes. And we broke it down into 3 simple models: push, jump, and punch. For us, from a non-weightlifting standpoint, we thought there was 3 specific ways to break down the clean. We're going to talk about pushing the bar off the ground rather than pulling. We're going to talk about jump, our triple extension movement, and we're going to talk about punch, punching the elbows through and receiving the bar in a proper catch position. So when an athlete approaches, these are things they can remember. They're not going to remember, oh, double scoop when above the knee, second transition, all the technical aspects of weightlifting that that's not in my jargon. But if you're a weightlifting coach, you understand what I'm trying to get at. For me and my goals is, how can I get the simplest cues that my guys understand? Oh, push, I know what that means. When he says jump, I know what that means. And I obviously know what punch means. So when you're designing programs and you're designing your teaching abilities, the number one thing you want to look at is, what are the cues that my athletes can understand? The simplest is always the better. Occam's razor. When in doubt, not a perfect quote, but when in doubt, simplest is always preferred. Okay, in the push phase, and we start off all our athletes with this first exercise. It's the Hex Bar Deadlift, and I prefer it to be a high handle Hex Bar Deadlift. And this is why. How many of y'all are doing some type of screening process with your athletes? Like functional movement screens, or you've developed your own screens? A lot of times what happens in those screens, they show that there is some deficiency in movement in your athletes. In some respects, some people would say, oh, well, they can't transition into the weight room and until they improve their functional movement screen score, their screening score. Well, I've known this through experience. The majority of the athletes that you get in your weight room probably have poor hamstring flexibility, core flexibility, and we can ramble on. Some of them won't even be able to touch their toes. But as a strength coach, one of your goals is to get them stronger. And as we go through the screening process, and we have found that most of your guys, when we get them a first time, whether it's a high school freshman or whether it's a college freshman, most of them cannot approach a standard barbell height in proper low back and hip position. That's why a lot of young kids get caught very early with a rounded back syndrome when they do their cleans. Because in the developmental process, no one's evaluated their ability to sink their hips to approach the bar. I already know that that's going to be a common occurrence with most of the abilities of most of the younger athletes and the beginning athletes I get. So while I'm correcting mobility and flexibility, I still have to get them stronger, correct? I mean, our time is valuable. And this is where we've utilized the high handle Hex Bar Deadlift, because it's approximately about a 4-inch higher starting position. And the center of mass is equally distributed in line with the hip, where a barbell is out in front that puts more stress on the low back to a beginner or a newbie in your program. So our ultimate goal is to reduce opportunities and protect the athlete, but I still have to get them stronger while trying to correct a mobility or flexibility issue. Does everybody follow in? So that's why we utilize the very first exercise we teach from the ground in the push phase is the high handle Hex Bar Deadlift. Because let's face it, I understand there's a pulling process in the deadlift. I understand there's a pulling process in the clean. But if you ask a young beginner to pull a bar from the ground, they're going to jerk the bar from the ground. They're going to break the elbow, the butt is going to fly up, so they've already extended their hips, and they're going to try to jerk the bar off the back, and then what do you see happens? They drop the bar, and they put their hand on their back, and they look at you like, uh-oh. We've all seen it. I've seen it. It doesn't make you feel very good as a coach. This will help improve that. Because the one thing I have noticed with the high handle Hex Bar Deadlift is you cannot jerk it. It becomes a pure push from the ground. It teaches you to apply force through your feet into the platform and elevate the bar into extension. It's very hard to jerk the high handle Hex Bar. It puts you in a very, very advantageous position to succeed with proper technique. So that is going to be the number one exercise that we use in our teaching progression to teach our athletes to push the bar off the ground. And again, as we're doing the high handle Hex Bar, we are taking them to the field and working hip mobility in all planes, body weight. We do some static flexibility work at the end of workouts for the hip flexor and groin. These are all integrated in while we're working on our strength lift. From there, we will progress to the clean grip deadlift. So it's a double overhand grip. I don't mind if they hook grip or not. And the one thing you'll see this afternoon with the clean grip deadlift as it relates to our athletes in the teaching progression and when we do deadlift for a repetition max is because all I'm looking for is the very basic premise of extension is once they've come to full extension, they are allowed to drop the bar. So they only are working the concentric action of the deadlift. Adam Feit, who worked for me at Louisville and Arizona State and the Panthers, will tell you when we do a 3 or 5 rep max with a clean grip deadlift, it's really almost a quick cluster. The athlete comes up to full extension, drops the bar, take a step back, resets the attack position, goes again. It's not timed. It's not like, oh, every 20 seconds. It's pretty much step back, get your wind, refocus, approach the bar in attack position, and do the next rep. Plus, it also helps you as a coach. You see you're going for a 3 to 5 RM, and that third rep shaky, you just dump it and say you're done. We don't use straps. Grip strength's important in athletics. If a guy loses it on grip, well, that's just part of the learning process. Those are our 2 major exercises for the push phase. And let me talk to you about deadlift. When I first started in coaching, the deadlift was kind of taboo in an athletic-based strength training program. They said it was too slow. They said it was a power lift, etc. Well, we're doing cleans and snatches and they're Olympic lifts. I know this in my process of a coach and learning from my own mistakes and watching and evaluating is this. If my job is to get strong athletes and develop strong athletes, I got to do strong exercises. And the deadlift is a strong exercise. Plus, when it comes to youth athletes and college athletes, the other thing I know is I've never seen it, and I've talked to some of the best weightlifting coaches in the world. My official introduction to weightlifting was by Mike Conroy out of Meridian, Idaho, who's one of the top youth coaches in the United States. My son's trained with Travis Mash, one of the top Olympic coaches at a muscle driver and Mash Elite. I know enough to know that this is going to occur. Your athletes will never clean more than they deadlift. Would you all agree with that? So why wouldn't I want them to have a solid, maximal deadlift to build the ultimate transferable trait in the strength and conditioning program, confidence? That's the only guaranteed transferable trait of a quality strength and conditioning program, is the confidence that the athlete builds with the improvement that he or she sees. So if I say this, if my athlete can deadlift 400 pounds, do you think he's going to be or she's going to be concerned if they're attempting a max effort clean at 265 pounds for the first time? I know they're not going to be too concerned about getting the bar off the ground, which is the #1 critical mistake factor that happens with athletes attempting maxes. How many pull from the floor? I would think almost anybody if they're in here. What do you see when the kid's going for a max for a weight he's never touched the first time? First of all, you see it in their eyes. Oh, man, this is a lot. And then they get in there, they get all hyped, all the kids are around, and they're down in this position here, and then it's boom, boom, something bad happens, and they're out. We've seen it. Because if you're not doing the deadlift, he's never probably deadlifted 275 off the ground, let alone tried to clean it. And let's face it, deadlifting is the simplest form of extension, which is really what we want, is hip extension. We all talk about triple extension, triple extension. Here's the simplest form. You know, everybody talks about plyometrics, jump rope. Run. Those are simple forms. You want a simple form of teaching extension in the weight room? Let's deadlift. And I'll tell you this, you'll see when you start developing a plan and the more athletes you coach, you'll go back to the basics. We Hex Bar Deadlift with Carolina Panthers. My front 7 guys do a 5-week base phase of Hex Bar Deadlift because we don't pull them from the ground. We pull them from the block, but I still need them to be in position because most of our front 7 guys, besides our linebackers, are in a 3-point stance. I need them to be strong in that position. So these exercises, even though they may be fundamental in a teaching progression, these are standalone exercises. And that's what makes it great about training athletes. Training athletes, these exercises matter in a different way than training a lifter. Jump phase. Our 2 big exercises of choice are Rdl to Shrug Progression. Primarily, we will have the athlete deadlift the bar up to the extension position and then bring them into position to do the Rdl to Shrug. Now, the Rdl to Shrug progression will start very, very slow and deliberate. So, for example, we'll have our athlete up tall. We'll teach him how to load the feet. We're going to push back to hinge. When you get break to shin height, we pull back to extension, and then it's a deliberate shrug. As they learn this movement and it becomes more fluid, now it may turn into a shrug without going to the toes or the balls of the feet. And then we come in and we start getting a little more dynamic. And then before you know it, they're Rdl and they're popping the hips through to work the jump. So start them very slow. A lot of people go right into jump shrugs and they don't even have the Rdl position. Plus the Rdl will blow their hamstrings up, which is going to help in all the other lifts that you're going to teach them down the road. And then the clean grip snatch. This is the only time really that I'll write a snatch into our programming. I think it's that important in teaching the clean because it fully teaches you to pull through extension and catch the bar overhead. I use the clean grip. It's a little bit more protective of the shoulder. It's always light. So now we're talking about the velocity and the speed of what you're going to need to catch a clean. And again, this is the one exercise that will not pop up, if at all, after we've taught our athletes how to do the power clean technique. Rdl to Shrug will pop up, deadlifts will pop up, Hex Bar Deadlifts will pop up. This is the only one that kind of disappears. But it has value in our teaching progression, so we're going to use it to our advantage. This one right here is one of the most what I think is one of the most misunderstood exercises in an athletic-based strength training weight room. And it's what I call the hybrid movement, the push-jump hybrid, which is a clean grip power pull from the deck. And a power pull for us is the elbow breaks. To me, most athletes do not have to pass this phase, because catching the clean is part of an Olympic movement that's evaluated in a sport. Do I like catching cleans? Yeah, I'm not very good at it, but catching a clean also has the receiving position and it shows completion. I know the people that talk about the power pull as well, where's the end of the lift? How do you evaluate it? Valid points. I'm not here to discuss that. They're extremely valid. Set a protocol. Ours is very simple. When we load and we come up, we're getting to full extension where the top of the arm is parallel to the ground. That's our goal for the clean grip power pull from the deck. Now what happens is, if you get your athletes at a young age, they will be very, very understanding of getting up tall. What happens is when you get an athlete who has previous experience in the clean and has also been taught to catch everything in the front squat. Because what happens with athletes versus weightlifters are, generally, they won't get full extension of the hip as they're trying to receive the bar in the front squat position. What generally happens with them, with a non-weightlifter, is they get to this point here and they try to pull themselves under the bar, and part of the goal of the Olympic lift is to get triple extension, correct? So they've lost that part of the movement, which is the key to athleticism in the weight room. So when we build this, I tell all our guys, regardless of training age, this is a standalone movement. The ultimate goal for us is to get up as high as we can to full extension, and then for us to make sure they understand the process is over, let the bar go. That's why we got platforms. That's why we got bumper plates. Let the bar fly. And our coaching cue based off this movement is, we are going to pull the bar through us rather than to us. So we're going to pull the bar through us rather than to us. And again, I cannot reiterate this enough, especially in the high school and youth training programs in the private sector. You can stop right there. You can stop right there. I can tell you right now, we have very few of our guys who catch cleans. You have to have a very natural ability of shoulder and wrist and even forearm flexibility to properly catch a clean as nice as an Olympic weightlifter. Most of the guys at my level, they're so beat up, I don't even tell them to catch it. We do all power pulls for the most part with our front seven. I've got some linebackers and tight ends that do catch a clean. I would say 1/3 of our total team catches, 2/3 pull. And we're all getting the same benefits, I promise you. So think about that when you're looking at your programming. The ultimate goal is to provide the confidence and the productive ability of strength, power, and speed when you hand them over to their coaches. And I understand that people are used to evaluating numbers. But I can tell you this, when I went and did some professional development and saw one team in particular clean from their one guy to their best guy and how efficient they looked, there was a 2-year period at Arizona State that we didn't clean because I didn't think we were doing a good enough job teaching it. And that was about 20 years into my career, and I'm saying we ain't doing it right. Don't be afraid to self-evaluate and say you're wrong. I mean, I'm at a Pac-10 team, and we're throwing it out. But we weren't doing our players and our athletes a true service by allowing that to continue, power reverse curls, because we're worried about how much a guy cleans. I mean, I was better off on a few of my linemen of getting log bars and having them do strongman log bar cleans like you see in World's Strongest Man, because that's what it looked like with a barbell. that has no transfer into what I'm trying to accomplish. We spent 2 years of being a power pull team, and when we brought back the clean, our efficiency was so much better, and it did transfer into a power of a 40-yard dash, long jump, vertical jump, and we could see a difference in team speed where it really relates to on the playing field. Why? Because we got better in extension. We got better in extension. Well, I'm running out of time fast. Punch phase. This is the hardest phase, and that's why I said, and that hybrid movement is so critical. If you have poor wrist flexibility and you're teaching the power clean, man, we are in trouble. That's a hard thing to work. The younger the athlete you have, the better off you'll get. You got a chance to really work that movement and work the exercises before it's too late. Obviously for us, the punch phase is going to be developed by doing a front squat with a clean grip catch. That's the #1 way to do it. And then there's exercises where the bar is loaded. You get a partner to push their hands up and work that. It hurts. I've tried it. It hurts. The simpler ones are up against the wall or on the ground where you're just loading the wrist, driving forward and back. That's the one that I prefer the most. It's easy to do in between sets. You can do it up against a rack. I do not mind athletes, if you're teaching the clean in the front, using straps, because the one thing I think about when you choke that strap up is you can watch their improvement in wrist flexibility by how high they have to hold the strap. As their wrist flexibility improves, they're generally able to get closer and closer to the strap until they're able to punch through. And why do we call it punch? It's very simple. It has to be a violent drive of the elbow. When you get up to that power pull phase, you are driving the elbow through. We came up with punch because in this day and age, most of the guys, regardless, are into MMA and watching all of the mixed martial arts. So as we say, punch the elbow. And they understand when you throw, some people would use drive. To me, punch is a violent term, and the punch has to be violent. Because if you're a slow catch, which I'm a slow, because my wrist flexibility is so poor, most of the times my problem is I can't punch the elbow fast enough to receive the bar in a good position. I can get a good pull, but the receiving position it's not something that you want to write home about, I can promise you. But you have to perform these lifts also so you can learn from your own awareness of how you can promote the teachability of what you're feeling to your athletes. Catch phase. The athletic position catch to me is that quarter squat position. So when we catch here, we received, boom. That would be the ultimate position for us to catch a clean for an athlete. I do not personally teach squat catch, but this is what I'll tell you from coaching my own sons, and in particularly my oldest son. Never once taught him to squat catch. And he was 13 or 14 years old. He's going for his first 80-kilogram clean, and he's you couldn't ask for a better power pull. I mean, spot on. It was like, wow, who coached that guy? You know, it's like all jacked up, but kept missing the clean, missing the clean, missing the clean. And then out of nowhere, maybe the 10th attempt, because his technical efficiency was so good, he wasn't fatigued. I could continue to rep him. On his 10th or 11th attempt, he pulls it and out of nowhere goes into a full, perfect front squat catch and squats the bar up. Right there, that told me, who am I as a coach to tell him that lift doesn't count, because he showed the athleticism that I could never, ever have, to just, on his own, be able to drop into a perfect front squat position in a full Olympic squat catch. So I don't promote the squat catch, but I embrace it if it occurs in a heavier loaded session. Does that make sense? I embrace it, because who am I to tell that kid who's twice as athletic as I'll ever be, that I don't want you to do that in a situation. Because again, I'm evaluating him on him. If he squat catches at a heavier load, he's always going to squat catch at a heavier load. The other thing I'll talk to you about catching, because the one thing that I've seen it too long is the jumping jack catch or the too wide catch. You have to remember, most Olympic lifters fall in a certain height and limb length. So they almost, regardless of size, except for the big monsters in the super heavyweight, they always look very similar when they catch, regardless of weight class. What I've learned is we're going to watch and evaluate an athlete's catch based off his squat stance, and more importantly, his front squat stance. So if you have a bigger athlete, he may actually catch wider than a wide receiver would because of hip width and size. So as a coach, you have to evaluate when they're squatting what their squat width is and use that as your guide. Craig Sowers also told me one time a great point on catching also is wherever the athlete starts, which is pretty much their vertical jump position, they can replace one width of the foot. And really, that most of the time is an athlete's squat position. But sometimes when you get those behemoth offense and defensive linemen, it may be slightly wider than that. These are some of the variations that we use. Right now, for us, we're primarily do block cleans. We don't do a lot of hang cleans very once in a while. And when we do hang cleans, we generally do that with what I call a strength-speed complex. Because when we do hang cleans, the great thing about block cleans are it starts you in a dead stop. So you get some good starting strength and the ability to push off the ground. When I use the hang cleans or we use the hang cleans, we would call drop and attack or drop and go cleans, because we will strength speed complex that with max effort vertical jump. So we're going to use a counter movement. So most of the time we would be in a loaded position off the block. With the hang clean, we'll be up tall, drop, and then go, just like we would a vertical jump. We'd start a vertical jump here, power down, explode. So when we do hang cleans, primarily it's programmed in with a strength speed complex with vertical jumps. So they'll do 2 reps of hang cleans, and within 30 seconds, they do a maximal effort vertical jump. 3-stage clean from a low block, that's a shrug pull, power pull, and a clean. And then sometimes, once in a while, we'll do a low block clean to a push press. But that's very, very rarely have I written that in. Okay, why ground up? Because most of our guys have to learn how to apply force into the ground. I know Olympic weightlifting, they teach top down, but why? They have to learn how to catch. They have to learn how to catch. That's extremely important. If that athlete cannot catch the bar, nothing else matters. But my guys, they don't have to. We got to work ground up. Jump phase. We want to teach it as close as we can to vertical jump mechanics. Punch, learn to absorb force. To apply force, you have to learn to absorb force. And then obviously the catch, we promote athletic position catch. Got 10 minutes? That should be okay. This might be a little hard to read. What I did here, and it was mostly for y'all, and if these slides did not come out well in your books, if you email me, I will send these to you directly, because what this is this is just an outline of a 40-week progression that we do with our Block 0 freshmen that was designed when we were at the University of Louisville when we really put it together. And you'll see the red exercises are exercises that we've done in our progression. But this is when our athletes first come in, they're in a Block 0 program. So you'll see they're doing pre-activity prep, stabilization work, relative strength and body weight work, movement prep, athletic position, and then we're teaching them the high handle Hex Bar Deadlift. This goes on, this is almost a 6-week program. This is college level freshmen. This isn't high school level freshmen. We start our college level freshmen at Block 0, training age of 0, because they've never trained with us. On Friday, you'll see we start teaching the front squat, and we teach the overhead press and pull-ups as part of our block zero progressions. As we continue to move on, so this would be summer one, and summer one will bring them into, summer two is about 4th of July week, a freshman would report. That's how they would start for 6 weeks. Then we move in, and now we start bringing in the tier system program. And you'll see how we've added more programming of the exercises we use in the push, jump, punch principles. So now we have high handle hex bar, front squat to a box, so we're starting to work our depth. And we use a box as a teaching tool to see where our athlete's depth is. The one thing I think the box gets a lot of positive reviews and a lot more negative reviews because people don't know how to use the box. The box is an evaluator for us to see where our athlete's depth is. Too many people I've watched use a box. A box is a hard surface. You cannot bounce off a box and try to improve your squat max. And more importantly, you cannot sit on a box and roll back and compress a spine that's already being compressed with axial loading and then try to rock up and do that. That does not mimic anything you do without the box. The box is a cloud. We use it to find out what the depth of the athlete's squat is. Clean grip snatch, front squat, and now we bring in the Rdl to shrug progression. As you see, we just continue to evolve and continue to bring in these exercises. And you'll see they rotate as we continue to go. They will rotate in order of importance. As we continue to move through the year, an evaluation period, but as we continue to move through the year, you'll see how certain exercises will come and go. Certain exercises climb up the ladder of importance. Some drop in level of importance, so to speak, when we prioritize our programming. Now we've entered in on cycle 5, clean grip deadlift. So now they're pulling through from the ground. You see we got clean grip power pull from the deck. The one thing I will tell you with the clean grip power pull that we've noticed, and I could be wrong, is generally what an athlete can power pull to very good technique for 3 reps is a good start to teach them when you convert them into cleans. So whatever their 3 RM is for clean grip power pull, that's generally the first number we'll use when we start percentaging their clean from the deck. And that's not set in stone. After week 1, we may be reducing guys up and down based on how well bar movement was. Another evaluation period. This right here took them through the season. And now they start the winter program if this was our football team. So now you'll see where we've got the deck clean is finally in after approximately being on campus 20 weeks. Does that sound right, Fight? Because we have approximately, if your team doesn't go to a bowl, you approximately got 40 weeks to train a football player on campus. They're going to be gone for a month during Christmas break, and you have to give them 8 weeks of discretionary time through January through May. So what we've put out here is this is exactly the 40 weeks that we utilized when we were at the University of Louisville in, what was that, 08 and 09. Is that right, Fight, when we were there? You'll see and we've got, those are the exact sets and reps we used and percentages. Still, the deck clean is still a tier 2 exercise because we're still working the strength from the clean grip deadlift. This is the end of winter. This is spring ball. First session of summer. And then finally, the second session of summer, we've made the deck clean the priority tier 1 exercise of their program.